It's an incredible privilege to be with you all in this place today, speaking in front of such an amazing group of people in this ancient place, in this important place in the world, the birthplace, of course, of democracy, something that is at risk if we don't get it right. More importantly, this is a place that 2,000 years ago, the Apostle Paul reasoned and preached to the learned, men of the Greek world, during the Apostles' great journey to bring the gospel. I want to begin by thanking Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew and the Archons for including me, hosting this incredible event. For many years, my wife, Susan, who's here with me today, have had a close personal relationship with the Orthodox Church. Susan was chrismated, Susanna, in the church, and our son, Nicholas, was baptized Basilios. It is an honor. It was earlier this year that we marked the second anniversary of Russia's invasion of Europe, of Ukraine. It affected thousands of innocent Ukrainians, mothers, fathers, sons, daughters. It's delivered destructions to homes, to businesses, to families, and to churches. And then each of us had our heart broken on October 7th. On October 7th, the barbaric attacks of the terrorists in that region launched a deadly assault that claimed the lives of over 1,000 innocent Israelis, several Americans, and many people from other parts of the world as well. The single most horrific act against the Jewish people since the Holocaust, bar none. Today, the Israeli military continues its work to secure its freedoms and, frankly, to bring a better life for the people in Gaza, too, we all pray. You may have noticed I traveled with a bit of a security detail. So I'm unbiased when I tell you that the Islamic Republic of Iran continues to present a threat to each and every one of us as well. It sponsored this attack against the Jewish people with an effort to take down Jerusalem and that great nation. And it continues to threaten all of the states in the region, including people of every faith. Which brings me to the topic that I really want to speak with you about today. It's about faith. We'll have a great chance. We'll have a Q&A. We'll talk about many things, many challenges that face the world. Indeed, my wife often says, Mike, when you get finished speaking, you talk about all these problems that people feel like they need to go out and take a Xanax or have a drink or both, which, by the way, really bad idea, both. So if you must choose wisely. We'll talk about military power. We'll talk about diplomacy. Indeed, I intend to talk today as a practitioner, not a theoretician, not an academic, but someone who was tasked with actually making the world a safer place. And when we need alliances, that's true. When we need more hard power, that is true. But I want to talk about the fact that I think it is a singular mistake to focus on those to the exclusion of the centrality of faith and religious freedom all across the world. I saw this firsthand in both roles, frankly. First as CIA director and then as Secretary of State. It is impossible to imagine freedom and human dignity without a core belief in religious tolerance and religious freedom. It is indeed a one-to-one mapping of the world to find nations that have religious freedom and human dignity and basic rights being respected. I was fortunate. Indeed, I consider myself blessed to have worked in an administration which was able to prioritize religious freedom all around the world. I met with religious leaders every place I went. I met with the chief rabbi of the United Kingdom. I met with the Grand Mufti in many places. I met with the Pope, although he chose not to meet with me the second time. And I'll get back to that in just a second. Every faith. And I had the chance to travel. I had the chance to travel to Constantinople and meet with the Ecumenical Patriarch. Despite the Turkish government's, mild approbation, How's that for diplomatic? And then in Washington, we brought it home too. In the Trump administration, we held the largest human rights gathering ever assembled in the United States of America at the State Department. It was called the Ministerial to Advance Religious Freedom. Archbishop, you had the chance to be there, and we were so honored by your presence there. I'm convinced that this changed the world. We brought people of every faith there. There were Catholics and Jews. There were Orthodox Christians. There were Presbyterians like myself. There were Hindus, Muslims. I am sure there were some Wiccans there. But people of every faith came together to proclaim the central understanding of governments and the destruction they can do to humanity if they do not tolerate and indeed demand religious freedom. You know, when I look back on the highlights of my time as Secretary of State, nearly every one of them had a huge faith component too. The personal highlight, perhaps, of my time as Secretary of State was when I had the incredible good fortune and the Lord's blessing and brought home three Americans who were detained in the horrific prisons of North Korea. These were three pastors, men of faith themselves. And the good Lord that day blessed me with both the courage and the strength and the power of America to return these men to their families and to their flocks. I was America's 70th Secretary of State, which always reminds me that Donald Trump was America's 45th president, which meant that there was more turnover in my gig than his. And I remembered it every day by checking my phone, make sure I checked Twitter, had a job, went to work. It was, Susan will swear by it. It was something we did just before we prayed to start our day. But it reminds me of our first secretary, Thomas Jefferson, who wrote that Almighty God has created the mind free. No man shall be compelled to frequent or support any religious worship or ministry, or shall otherwise suffer on account of religious opinions or belief. I think that centrally sums up how important religious faith is in the world. You know, I mentioned support for Israel. We moved our embassy to Tel Aviv. We recognized the Golan Heights as the rightful property of the Israeli people. And we compelled the United States government to stop making payment to some of the organizations that were sponsoring the very denial of faith and the terrorism that we've seen today. We were unabashed in supporting religious freedom because we knew no matter what faith they were practicing, that if they were permitted to do this freely and to respect their own most deeply held, most personal views, that nation was more likely to be a partner and a friend to the United States of America. You know, as a practitioner, you have to make difficult decisions, and we certainly did as well. You know, we faced the challenge in Ukraine, where we could see that the Russian Orthodox Church was behaving in a way that was inconsistent with man's most fundamental human rights. Indeed, we've all seen that Putin's church and its popular support for the Russian people vanished and instead supported a war of aggression. That invasion, of course, causing tens of thousands of lives today. It's worth pausing here for a moment. There are some around the world, and indeed some in America, who talk about this as Putin's holy war. Make no mistake, this is a war of conquest. This is not a holy war. His goal is not religious, but rather to conquer the sovereign states that he feels should be subservient to his own. It's an imperative for all of us. I would encourage each and every one of you, as I try to do today, even in my life as a private citizen, we need to speak the truth. We need to speak the truth at all times, just like in 2019, when Patriarch Bartholomew did just that, when he granted the Orthodox Church in Ukraine autocephaly, making the vast number of Orthodox Christians in Ukraine capable of exercising their true faith. I remember the true fight inside the State Department when we decided that we'd put out a statement in support of the Patriarchate and its decision. Mike, we should stay out of this. Mike, this is an intra-Russian, intra-Orthodox fight. I didn't view it that way. I viewed it as central to America's place in the world to declare the truth about religious freedom. And when a church is hijacked by those who are no longer honoring its central traditions, then America has both the right and indeed the obligation to call that out. And I'll close with this thought on Ukraine. Some in America continue to cast Ukraine's leaders as enemies of religion for introducing restrictions on churches that are aligned with Putin's war efforts. I think that's dangerous. I think we should be clear. There's a difference between a government taking responsible actions to keep its citizens safe, especially its people of faith, and limiting religious freedom. It is the government in Moscow, not Kyiv, that is shamefully using the church to justify war. There's another place that religion has been abused. That's in Iran. The people of Iran deserve better. Muslims in Iran deserve better. You know, the president of Iran died in a helicopter crash just now a week on. But note that nothing will change inside of Iran. So long as the Ayatollah, a kleptocrat, a thug, a terrorist, a murderer, cloaked in the garments of faith, so long as he is in power, the religious freedom and the power of a great nation, Iran, to lift up its own people and their dignity will continue to be sought, to be plundered. I'm always reminded, and certainly was for all 1,000 days as Secretary of State, that the world has evil. We should never forget that. Never forget that the history of the 1930s, when the entire world turned a blind eye to that evil, what was happening inside of Germany. We have to continue to push back against that very same evil today that finds itself, as John spoke about, all across the world. Indeed, on our campuses in America, both with the students and the faculty, and in places we would never expect it to be. Our requirement, each of our requirement, is to stand with each country as it attempts to defend faith all around the world and protect its own people, including its Jewish people. The church in Korah is not just a building. It's a historic place. It's a holy place. President Erdogan has proceeded with plans that threaten and indeed coerce the people of Turkey into abandoning their faith and its holy places. That church is listed among the masterpieces on UNESCO's World Heritage Site. It holds unimaginable value, nothing related to bricks or mortar, but to the heart and to the spirit. There is no reason that it should be desecrated. I pray that it will not be. This year marks that region's 50th anniversary of the invasion of Cyprus, not far from where we sit today. We, in the Trump administration, did our best to push back against that. We lifted the long-standing arms embargo on the nation and made historic progress in building out U.S. and Cypriotide with our Greek friends as well. We were able to build out a solid partnership to give a little more space and a little more tolerance for freedom and religion in that place. We were sometimes critiqued in the Trump administration. We were unabashed. We always put America first. I remarked countless times to counterparts that I met. For instance, in Bangladesh, I told the leader of Bangladesh, you should put Bangladesh first. And when you do that, and when we each put our own peoples first, we protect our own sovereignty, our own borders, human rights within our own nation, religious freedom within our nation. When each of us does that for our own nation, then we will have better partners for peace, better partners for prosperity, and wider space, the glorious wider space that the Lord demands for religious freedom. We didn't get it right every day for 4 years. The mistakes were mine. The good things that happened were the Lord's. But we always had this deep knowledge that while we had big challenges and real responsibility and duty that was sometimes just so burdensome that it sat on my shoulder that I went to my knees in prayer. And that's what I hope that each of us will do as we face challenges in our own lives, in our personal lives, in the lives of our families, in the challenges that are in our churches. I hope that we will all recognize that there is something bigger than us. I would in the morning, I would read this thick book, all bad news. It was the intelligence from overnight. There wasn't a single good story in there. And then I would try somewhere during the day to find a chance to read that other book, the good book, the book that is filled with love and filled with His Word and filled with the joy that comes from the risen Savior. It would always bring me back, and it would remind me that no matter who'd called and screamed at me that day, and who had called, frankly, to thank me for something we had done to try to help them, that it was not my work, it was our work, it was indeed His work. Some of you will remember from 2010, there was a speech that President Obama had given. It became known, at least to me, as the Apology Tour. And it always just had irked me. And then I got a chance to be Secretary of State. He'd given that speech in Cairo. And so I decided I wanted to go to Cairo and give that same speech from the same place. He had spoken at Al-Azhar University. In the end, I wasn't able to go to Al-Azhar University. My security team said they couldn't protect me there. It was funny because they'd protected President Obama there, but I was told, yes, sir, they liked him. What irked me about the speech wasn't that it had some policy consideration. It wasn't remotely political. It was that it had failed to recognize the enormous force for good that America has always been. The fact that when evil walks the earth, it has always been the United States that has stood strong. And second, it failed to recognize that the reason that America had done that, along with many of the friends in this room that aren't from America, the reason that America had been able to do that is because we were founded in a place that understood our Judeo-Christian heritage, that understood the central truth that I spoke about that then Secretary of State Jefferson spoke to, the centrality of faith in each of our lives. And it's important on a global stage of delivering better outcomes for the billions of people who so richly deserve them. I hope that you will, as you have this first-of-a-kind gathering of Archons from all across the world, I hope you will each take away from this time together, this time in fellowship with each other and with your faith leaders. Take away that responsibility, your personal commitment to remind every day someone in your life how central faith is, how central religious freedom is to be permitted, not provided by, but permitted by governments. When we get that right, when each of us gets that right, I am very confident that religious freedom around the world will flourish and the Lord will smile upon each and every one of us. Thank you for the chance to be with you. I look forward to the conversation.